So we're moving forward, and now we're having a panel this time around. And it's again with Women Leading Change. And this panel will be led by one of my fellow co-chairs, Julie Montgomery. So I'm going to turn the floor over to her. And welcome back, everybody.
Thank you, Drea. Thanks, everyone. It's been an awesome morning. I feel really energized and inspired and have really had some light bulb moments already myself today. I hope you have too. I've also had a lot of LinkedIn requests to connect, which is awesome, and some really great conversations with many of you. I picked up travel tips for women traveling alone. I picked up restaurant recommendations and now have a wealth of menopause resources. So if any of you are interested in any of those things, please come see our table. So the panel that we're about to kick off here is Women Leading Change, which is really just, an echo of what the whole day is about. And when we started thinking about Catalyst and what we wanted to talk about today, I do change work myself and have done change work in a formal way for more than 15 years now. I always catch myself off guard by just how old I am. I was telling Dawn last night, I didn't realize, I told everyone this year I was a year younger than I really am, not out of vanity, but I literally just didn't realize how old I am. So, but some of the things that Nikki talked about this morning about leading change when you're not actually in a position of authority to lead change, and how do you do that, and what does that look like? And so the amazing panel that we've assembled here today is going to talk to you about change in a lot of different shapes and sizes. So whether you're formally doing change work, or whether it kind of comes to you, or whether you seek it out, what that journey can look like for you, what that path will look like for you, or could look like for you. And one of the things that was really important sort of foundation for us was a Forbes article that we read about how women, no disrespect to the men in the room, if they're still in the room, come back. Exactly, we welcome you back. Is that there's a lot of good data in science and research that says that the traits that are really innately helpful in leading change or making change happen are traits that women excel in and women have in their toolkit. And so that was really one of the things that we wanted to talk about as a group today. So I've talked plenty. I want to have my amazing panelists introduce themselves. Renee, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure.
I think you have to make it green.
Green. Excellent. Well, good afternoon. Oh, see, that's what I'm talking about. My name is Renee Holder, and I'm the founder and president of Janus Management Group, a boutique change management firm in New York. And prior to actually starting my consulting career, I spent many, many years working on global HR, IT, and retail technology transformations. And in that capacity, I was really focused on training, so leading the training for all of these initiatives. And what really irked me was when people came to my class. So if any trainers in the room, you know that back in the day, we did a lot of classroom training. A lot of it's now online. But a lot of people arrived in my classroom surprised by what I was going to teach them, because no one told them in advance what the changes were and what the impact was. And spending many years as a employee, I decided, I'm going to change my focus so I can design the experience from the beginning to the end. Hence, I started my own consulting firm, and now that I have done it, we celebrated 10 years last month. So yeah, so I'm very proud of that. And it's one of those things where I think we talked about resilience earlier, that it's something to be like, what am I doing? Are you crazy? But it's really giving yourself your best life. And how do you create the space for you to excel? So that's me. That's Renee. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
First, Julia, would you like to?
First, Julia?
Yeah, you're first, Julia.
I'm second. I love this setup. I got to be honest. It's like a little bucket list for me to be on the UN and talk, and I feel like I need to talk about climate change. It's so serious and exciting.
Have a translator.
So hello, my esteemed panel. I'm so honored to be with you and even sit with you and break bread with you, which has been absolutely amazing. I can tell when I actually have a little bit of adrenaline going, not only because of speaking, but because you just love the room, right? Like you just love the room. And I didn't know how many people would be here. And sometimes it's really big. It's just like it's a whole living room of people having a conversation. It's like very eat, love, pray. So I thank you all for that. So thank you. I've been about diversity and inclusion. So for about over 15 years. I've been in, I know that might sound a little bit interesting to be on a leading change, but diversity, equity, inclusion is really the idea of every time you show up, people are like, or thank God you're here, right? So, and then the change begins from cloud to grass. So I think what's a little bit interesting is my road in that. I've been a mature student. I've been in finance. I've been in legal. I was a law clerk for many years and worked at Fraser Miller Grain, which is Blake's now in Toronto. It's one of the big 7 sisters. So I have that kind of background too. I've worked in academia. I was a professor and I taught at college. I do not have a PhD, just that's what they titled it, and just want to throw it in there because it sounds really nice. Anyway, and now I'm a woman in tech, doing diversity inclusion. So I always say when I talk about women in tech in general, I said, listen, I'm interested in products, but I'm obsessed with people and all what that means. So when you look at those different entities that you've been in, my experience in those 15 years has been hilly and winding and challenging, and thus the change comes in. And with all of that, I can't wait to have a conversation. So thank you very much.
Of course. Mary?
Thank you, Julia, and big thanks to Renee and Julia Satov. We've had such fun preparing for this, and I hope you get to enjoy some of that energy today. My name is Mary Abraham. I'm a consultant in collaboration and, more importantly, collaborative leadership, which, if done right, involves change. My backstory, I'm a recovering lawyer, an incurable technophile. I'm a teacher via my writing. Some of you have read my blog for decades now, but also through conferences like ILTA and in the university. I too, without PhD, taught at Columbia in this case. And I'm a long time fan and supporter of ILTA. I truly believe what this organization stands for, what it does, and I have met some wonderful people through this organization, as you will begin to hear over the course of this conversation, and I'm truly grateful. So thank you all for being here. Look forward to our conversation.
Yes, thank you, Mary. And I'm Julia Montgomery. I'm Senior Director of Solution Adoption at NTAP and one of your Women Who Lead Initiative co-chairs this year. We're thrilled you're here. And you heard all of the panelists use the word conversation. And as we were preparing, we had the best conversations about all the stuff I mentioned earlier, but also about change. And so our goal today was to give you that experience as much as we can, for you to be part of a conversation with us about change and what it feels like to lead change and what it might look like in your life. And Mary mentioned that she's been a longtime ILTAN. I too am a longtime ILTAN, and that's actually how Mary and I met more years ago than either of us cares to admit. One of the things that Mary and I did in our past in ILTA was we organized one of ILTA's first non-traditional format sessions. It was modeled on TED Talks. And the theme for that session was, what is your superpower? And we talk a lot about superpowers these days, but at the time, we didn't talk about it that much. And I was asked to be a speaker in that session. I was excited, thrilled. And then I sat down and realized I did not know what my superpower was. And so after reflection, I decided that my superpower was empathy. And that's what I spoke on that day. And so I wanted to kind of kick things off by asking our panelists, when we think about change and leading change, making change happen, what do you think your superpower is? I'm going to start with you, Mary. Turnabout's fair play.
Okay. My superpower is being a 4-year-old. I am incurably curious, and I'm always asking why. Why didn't that work as planned? What was really going on? And then the second, if I'm allowed a second superpower,
I have more than one superpower.
Is a willingness to experiment, because it isn't enough to ask the question why, but once you've identified something, you then have to try that something new to find a better way. So I guess that's the 4-year-old with a little bit of adult on the side, but it works. It works.
Thanks. Julia, how about you? What would you say your change superpower is?
My change, I would say my superpower is that I apply to change is becoming invaluable or becoming valuable. And I'm not saying this lightly, and I'm not saying it because it sounds sexy. Hopefully it does, but but to be honest, that really incites my passion, but it also incites my imposter syndrome. And I know we talk about it a lot. It never goes away. It just shows up creepily in a 2.0 and a 3.0 when we were talking about it.
Yes.
And so that kind of survival, right, to make it, especially if you want to get to where you're going, you want people to follow with you. When you do change, it's a contact sport, right? And that's how people follow along and buy in, if we're going to be able to do it and do it well and talk through it. So before they go to somebody else, they'll come to you who's running and leading because you care about the people you lead with that. That's becoming invaluable to me. And so there's a little bit of always a shadow side to that, but that's how I've kind of applied it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that afterwards.
Great. And Renee, how about you?
I am the sniffer out of resistance. That is my superpower. So just feel it out. Oh, is anybody else on? Here's the- Oh, that one. Yes, so I sniff out resistance. And again, when you kind of look back at what I said earlier, being that trainer and people coming in not ready, you see people who are fighting what you're trying to either say or maybe their leader said. And I never knew this was something I was good at, but as a trainer, you learn about body language, you learn about eye contact, and you just learn how to watch people as you speak to them. And I found that there are separate, specific times when people resist, right? I think we heard this morning about fear. Sometimes it's the messenger. They don't trust their manager. Maybe the change went wrong the last time, so they no longer believe. And these sort of things really impact the success that we have as change leaders. So my main thing is, how do you sniff around and you find people either looking out the window when the leader is talking about the change, they're not showing up to the meeting, all these different things. And you usually hear things like, oh, that's just Sal. Oh, that's just Bob. They're just grumpy. No. I will seek them out. And my goal is really to turn resistors into champions. And am I always successful? No, because sometimes people are set in their ways, but I wanted to take the chance at getting them across the finish line. So that's my superpower.
I love it. So I talked about empathy being my superpower, and the way I leverage it when I'm doing change work is many of the questions I ask a lot of questions like Mary does. Sometimes people aren't always excited when you ask a lot of questions, but I try and ask questions that I think really represent the viewpoint of the people in the seats, the people that the change is happening to, or the people that the change is being done to, because that's how people feel about change. And I say feel about change because change work is a lot about how people feel. If they feel good about change, right, then they will embrace or at least participate willingly. But it took me a long time to understand that my empathy could be a superpower in my work. And so all of you talked about your superpower, but now I kind of want to follow up and ask, did you always think that that was a superpower? Julia?
No. Well, I was told it wasn't a superpower.
Yes. How
So-
many of you have
Yeah,
had that where it's something that
honestly.
you feel is a strength and you've been told, dial it back? Like I was recently told I
Really?
asked too many questions. I was told that.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So I'll make it really quick. It still makes me kind of sad. So it was a woman above. And that's one thing that when we talk about it, allyship looks different. It's beautiful and it's tough, and sponsorship also looks different. It doesn't necessarily always have to be, it was really tough and it was a male, it kept me down. It's not. Or the way, remember the resistance, the overwhelming sometimes looks at the system design. It's very competitive, and it's been created to be competitive between women. And you have to change the system and the culture and the thought of that. I'm working in an area when this happened where it was very competitive for women, even women of color, to be able to advance up. And so as I came into my director's office, lovely, but not how I would have come about this. And I was really excited, but I went over and above and did something on role. And she cut me off like stopped me and she said, Julia, whenever you come into my office, I need you to come in as if it's an interview. She said, you have way too much passion and you need way more gravitas. And so you see how I roll here. I'm a global director of diversity and inclusion. I work on Unitar, an affiliate at York University. I do convocations, speaking events. I do all of it. And I'm always the same person. Because it inevitably peaks out when I'm trying to be all serious. It just comes out and then it's like, you's a liar, right? So, and so I can't. And if it took me longer to do it, it was fine. I didn't do my strengths finder at the time, which was winning others over and learning about them is a good thing. But she told me it's not my superpower. And it still hurts, even though it is my superpower and it's where I work. Now, a lot of people will say, I've even got turned down for jobs. They'll tell you, I love your passion, but I'm really not sure if you can execute on it. I was like, well, that's what the 30, 60, 90 days is for, boo, right? Like, we all don't know how we're gonna go on this. I'm not sure if I'm gonna like you or not, but because I came with so much passion, it worked against me. And so that really upset, like you could tell, it really upsets me, but I don't want it to upset you. You just have to we just get more wise about how we use it. And that comes from sisterhood, that comes from allyship.
Well, it's also hard too, because those conversations can really help beat imposter syndrome, right? Where you're just starting to feel really grounded and comfortable in who you are and what you believe your superpower is and exploring ways to utilize that. And then boom, along comes something like that. And you're right back where you started with that imposter syndrome creeping up on you and doubting yourself. So it's really hard. Thanks for sharing that. And of course, it was on the, I mean, we talked about it.
I was like, thanks for asking. She's like, well, it's on the
I mean,
paper.
we talked about it.
Excuse the
I'm
interruption,
kidding.
folks.
Renee,
Can
how
the-
about you? Did you always
Can the
believe that you were
panelists speak up a
resistance?
little bit, please?
Oh, yes.
We're
Sorry,
having
we
trouble
couldn't-
hearing you in the remote offices.
Okay, sorry, here we're really loud.
Yeah.
So Renee, you talked about being a resistance sniffer as your superpower. Did
Yes.
you always feel that that was your superpower?
No.
Mhm.
And again, that comes with, years and years and years of practice. My initial, I think at the beginning of my career, it was really communication and engagement. You won't believe this, but I'm an introvert. And, but my theater, I have a theater degree, so I think that's where the rest of this comes out. But I love communication, whether it is designing it, writing it, performing, but at the same time, that one-on-one with people, I really love that. So that's what I thought it was. But over time, as I've done different projects with different clients, I realized that people that nobody wanted to approach because they were resistors, I was like, let me at them. And that's how I think that has grown to be my current superpower.
And an entire business.
Yes,
A very successful business.
indeed.
I love that. Mary, how about you?
Well, I told you all that my superpower was being a 4-year-old. The problem is by the time you turn 5, nobody wants to hear your questions. And in the workplace, it's really bad because we still have an industrial era model of work where the managers provide the brains and the workers provide the brawn. And you're meant to follow orders quietly, compliantly. In that context, questions are unwelcome and they're viewed as disruptive. Now, what we've also learned is that research shows that in a room, even in a small room, people tend not to share all the information they have, maybe relevant information. And it's not because they're withholding or being malicious. Sometimes they don't realize other people don't know it. They assume if they know it, everyone knows it. Or sometimes they don't think others would be interested. Sometimes they don't even always understand the impact of what it is they know. So in a room where you are deliberately or culturally suppressing questioning, you are suppressing the free flow of information, the information that could help you make a better decision. So the thing I've had to learn to make my 4-year-old less aggravating is to learn how to ask good questions. The person on the other end always knows if you're asking a gotcha question. And there are lots of gotcha questions in legal because we all think we're smarter than the person next to us, right? So, but if they can see that the question is being asked as a genuine offer of help, a genuine offer to clarify, to strengthen, to improve, you go far with that. So that's how my 4-year-old has slightly grown up.
I love that. My inner 4-year-old. I'm gonna use that one. So I mentioned at the outset of our panel discussion or our conversation that, some of us are doing change in a formal role. Some of us have come to it through different paths. I've not yet encountered a 4-year-old or a 10-year-old who's, when you ask them what they want to be when they grow up, they say, oh, a change management practitioner. Not on that short list of things that they say. So unlikely that any of us had a childhood dream of, becoming a change, an agent of change. So I'm kind of curious to learn about your path to the work. How did change work come to you, or how did you find it? Or how did you realize, even like one day, maybe you just realized, I think I'm doing this change management thing, right? Renee, I'm gonna start with you. Yeah.
So again, I think all roads lead back to training for me. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a teacher of little children. And then I had sisters and I said, never, we're not doing that. So it's just life happened, because I started in finance, really. My background is in finance. And then I eventually got into training adults and adult learning. And I really kind of looked at, I didn't realize it was one of the stools in change management, engagement and communication. And that's probably how I kind of slipped into it. The manager, I worked at Nike for 17 years, and my manager was always like, Renee, you got to do change management, because I was in her team, but doing distance training. And she goes, you're so good at it. I'm like, no. Training's my thing. I'm good. And it's not till I moved to New York and I worked for a team where the leader had no change management background. And because of background with Nike with it, I was coaching my leader and realized I am good at this stuff. So that's, I think, how I came to do it. And one of the things, as I became a consultant now, you guys all know that once you start doing something, it becomes innate, right? You're just doing it. You don't even think about it anymore. And clients would say, that is so amazing. Something that I took 10 minutes to do. They're like, it's so amazing. And I thought, why do they think this work is so magical? And it's not till I was talking to these ladies that it was really around the magic is in you. We all have magic in us that we bring to the table. People may not recognize it, but that's what it is that makes a difference in change management for all of us. So that's kind of how I kind of got into this work, by accident.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that something that you said, Renee, it resonates, something Nikki touched on this morning. The magic is in you. It's been in you all along. Is there are things, and again, tying back to that article that we read about women sort of being innately skilled at these things. There are things that need to be done, information needs to be shared, care that needs to be given. It's in you. You just have to connect that to, this is change work, right? This is how you make change happen in an effective way. I love that. The magic, it's not magic, but the magic is in you, right? Julia, how about you? What was your path to change work?
I'm diversity and inclusion leader, and diversity and inclusion is all about change. It's about changing minds and changing behaviors. So I'm living the dream, right? When it comes to change, even though I don't feel like I'm like a specialist at it, but having the hard knocks on what people need. So I'll give you a little bit of example rather than blabbing on about me particularly, which is the example. So right now I'm in for about 3 years. I'm really enjoying the work, and it's a global portfolio. It's a legal tech company. And when this started about 3 years ago, I launched a strategy, and the strategy started 3 years. 1 year was crawl, walk, run. When you start in the crawl, I remember sitting out at we have a wonderful, she's a female visible minority veteran woman CEO, by the way, that we have right now. But prior to that, we had a male visible minority male, and he sat there and the executives, and I rolled out the strategy. And I said, I want you to know that my interest is to build trust with the collective, not to impress you. And I said it like that, and I was like, right? But if you really want me to be here, I gotta be here. But change management was the idea of before you do diversity and inclusion and you roll it out and you have all these lovely expectations, which often happens. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is about initiatives. It's not about initiatives. It's actually about a mindset, changing a mind. And so I launched psychological safety as our engagement, like based on research of Gallup. So I said, well, we're going to run a psychological safety and inclusion survey. We're talking private equity, M&A, fast-paced company. Talk about a quiet room of executives, right? They're like, what academic fairy business of psychological safety? And so it began, was the change of integrating that into, we need to know where people are at so they don't leave. How do you put that into articulation of importance, right? So that's my change management world, but here's an example of pretty tough change, which is really, I'm quite proud of the work that we've done to date after 3 years. So.
Yeah, that is definitely change work, right? Might not be what folks typically think of, but it certainly qualifies, I think. And really challenging because it challenges a lot of long-held beliefs or organizational culture, and that can be some, right? And Mary, how about your path?
A little roundabout. My career has spanned not one, not two, not three, but 4 recessions. And I'm still only 29. But all of those dislocations bring about change. And I have unfortunately also been on the receiving end of a lot of bad change management. And it was often done with what I would call a male hierarchical view, which was you mandate the change, you expect compliance. And it's easy, do it or leave. And then we got a little bit more evolved, and it was mandate the change, explain the reason for the change, because that's going to make the difference. Comply or leave. And yet with all of these things, I was becoming a better communicator because I needed to explain the change, but we weren't getting the results. And I realized that the change model these folks were using was the old Cotter model. For those of you who are in the change world, that Cotter doesn't even use anymore, but it's very much head up. And I realized that for my team, I needed to deal with their hearts and their hands. And I needed another way of allowing them to see, enabling them to see that the change could be potentially to their benefit and they would not be left behind unless it was by choice. So for me, it was really part of my effective leadership that led me to try and find a better change model, because what I was seeing around me wasn't working and I didn't want to lose my teams.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I will say that when we started having our conversations about what we wanted to talk with you all about today, we sort of tiptoed around a particular topic that we all, I think, agreed with, but we weren't really sure we wanted to go there. And that was that we think women are better at leading change than men. And we were so grateful to see Nikki open the door on that today, because we're like, yes, we can say it now. Felt safe. Thank you for that. My experience, my journey to change work was a more formal one, right? I'm certified in change management, and I did change management consulting work, and now I lead a team that focuses on driving adoption through change management. And time again, what I found was when I would go in to do this work, women that I would work with got it, right? People feel some kind of way about the technology they work with, or about what we ask them to do, or how we ask them to work. And we can't discount that. And often when I would work, and this is not a, she, me, and woman haters club, or flip that around, you know what I mean. But oftentimes when I was working with male leaders, I didn't get that acknowledgement. It was more about like what Mary said, well, this is what we're doing. And you either get on board or you get off the boat. And I've rarely seen that be effective. You might get people to do what you're trying to get them to do, but the resentment and the unhappiness, it festers and people leave, or they just check out and they're not productive anymore. So my path to change work was a little more formal, a little more structured than some of those that are at the table, but we all end up in the same place. And I think we've all had some shared realizations about how this thing works, which I think is pretty cool. I wanted to, a dramatic reading, if you don't mind for just a moment. We were talking about catalyst. And so I went to the dictionary and looked up the definition of catalyst. Catalyst, Merriam-Webster says, is a substance that changes the rate of a chemical reaction, but is itself unchanged by the process. Such a substance speeds up a reaction or enables it to proceed under milder conditions. And I love that last part. Allows a change to proceed under milder conditions. We are the buffer. We are the shiny, happy face of the Borg, right? That's my sci-fi nerdness coming out. But the change is happening. The change is going to happen. But as catalysts, we enable it to happen with milder process. It feels easier for people. It feels more digestible for them. They can embrace it. So we talked about superpowers, and now I wanted to kind of expand. Maybe some of the ladies with us today, and those two guys, they're back. Maybe they don't think empathy is their jam. Maybe they don't feel like, oh, I ask a lot of questions. So what are some of the traits that you think women innately have that make them ideal catalysts to help make the change process milder for folks? Julia, I'm gonna start with you.
Sure. So I'm gonna take a little bit of a deviated stance from that. So I do diversity and inclusion work. So for me, I always worry about gender normative traits and putting them on women and the expectations of it, because then we have to have the shadow side look of it as when it hinders us and doesn't work. However, I will put this out there. What's really important to me, and hopefully this is a trait of mine, that does come out if we're looking at just brushing with a large stroke, playing well with others. It's really important. It's on the kindergarten report, right? Do you play well with others? When you had teamwork, even my youngest was like, man, I did all the work and the whole team gets, I go, it doesn't change when you're older. But who's on the team? And anyway, but the point is playing well with others. And I'll tell you the reason why that tends to fall within the paradigm of women identifying and all the beautiful identities of it within, is because that is the role we've had to nourish and be nourished and be the nourishers. So it's how we play. And at this time, even after COVID and George Floyd and this consciousness that's been rising that we've had deep in our souls, the relationships is what really creates that connection and power. If you think about it, that's the trait that we normally come with. Not only us, there are others, and you'll see those wonderful, beautiful leaders come out and you go, I love working with that person. It's probably because of that particular trait that I feel is super important.
Thanks for that. Mary, I'm gonna go the opposite direction. Yeah.
When Julia first asked this question, I slightly rolled my eyes and I said, well, the feminine traits are fortitude and patience, because we have to put up with a hell of a lot and we have to wait a long time to get what we want. But when I took a step back from that, I realized those are actually quite useful traits for consensus building, which is key to achieving change. But taking a step back further into Julia's lead-in about the catalyst, apparently on the chemistry side of things, and I'm no chemist, the catalyst effectively removes barriers to change and makes the change easier. And so as leaders, I think that we can do for our people. Find out what the institutional barriers are, there will be some, but then also find out what the personal individual barriers are and figure out how to make it easier for them. Otherwise, they're trying to do this lift by themselves without any information really about what's going on in the C-suite or in the management committee, what's happening in the world that's affecting the firm. They don't know any of that stuff, and all they see is a very big lift. So I think that's the way we can be effective catalysts. And I'm going to tell you one. Can I tell a quick story? Really quick story. So Julia mentioned that TED Talk she gave on empathy. That was part of an experimental track that ILTA let me lead that year, because it had dawned on conference leadership that we were getting tired of panel discussions, and because that used to be the norm at ILTA, and wanted to try more interactive things. I've been doing interactive sessions for a few years. And for those of you in New York who've done stuff with me, you know interactive sessions are my thing. And so they gave me a whole track, but that meant that everybody, from the DevOps people, the security people, to the KM people, had to come and work with Mary to create a foreign substance called an interactive session. So my job as leader of that change was to make the change as easy as possible for them. And what I did was I met with each team, and maybe for an hour, and I said, okay, tell me what it is you wish to accomplish. And then we talked around some ways of them doing that. And then I said, okay, so here's what you're going to have to do to get that done. And they said, and I said, that's it. And they said, it's really that easy? I said, oh yeah, maybe even easier than that. And so what happened was we got them to the result they wanted faster, with much less work than any of the people who were trying to wrangle panelists and put together a slide deck. I don't think we had to make another argument in favor of that change again. It worked.
Right? Proof is in the pudding. And I wanted to just kind of piggyback on something that you talked about, which is as leaders kind of lightening the load for our teams. One of the things that I think can be a challenge sometimes when you are attempting to lead change or change is happening in your organization, and maybe your organization hasn't embraced a culture of change management yet, right? And maybe they never will. There's the old parable about the starfish, right? You see the person walking down the beach and they're picking up a starfish and throwing it into the ocean, and someone stops them and says, you know, why are you doing that? You can't save all the starfish on the beach. No, but I can save this one. And that is something that I think about with regard to change management in an organization that has not embraced change management. I'm responsible for my teams. And if I look and I don't think that the communication has been effective or hasn't been as complete as it needs to be, then I step in and I fill that gap. If there's no training being offered, no enablement to help my people feel they have the skills and knowledge they need coming from the organization, I step in and I make it happen, right? I can curse the darkness or light a candle. I do a lot of darkness cursing, don't get me wrong. But then I roll up my sleeves and I have to light that candle because I know better. I know how this needs to go for my people to get on board. And so I pick it up and do it. It's not coming from the bigger board, then I got to do it for my people. Renee, did you have any other thoughts on innate traits that are useful?
Yeah, I think, it's so wonderful. The last, how many hours we've been here already? We've learned so much, but so many trigger words are in there that are awesome. And one of the things I think we cannot discount as women is our intuition. We know when something's up. And we either have to say it out loud that, you know what, and raise our hand or just speak out. Because I think sometimes when we don't do that, things get away. And at the end, we're like, I knew it. I knew that was going to happen. But do we have the space and the safety to be able to speak up at the time? But the other side of that is to what Julia M said before, which is that empathy piece. I always believe, and my mantra is no stakeholder left behind. And I really, I don't want it to sound too, I don't know what the word is, but we change lives. We're changing lives. And it's not like a doctor, and it's not like, someone else in like a fireman or something like that. But when we spend 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours a day in the office, that takes a lot of time out of our lives. And when change happens, as a change leader or someone who has the inside scoop on what the change is, I think, oh, it's a breeze. That's no problem. It's going to be so much better for them. But for Sally and Bob sitting in their desks, it is literally a life-changing thing for them. Sally's all of a sudden worried that now this work is going to take longer, so she can't leave on time to go pick up her kids. Bob was the go-to guy in the department. He knew all about the systems. Now we're changing the system. Now Bob has no identity. So all these kind of things play into how people react to hearing about a change. So whether it's our intuition going, he said that, but I think there's something underneath that I need to explore, or whether it's just looking at people and seeing how they react and you almost want to give them that virtual hug because not everybody's hugging these days, but that virtual hug and say, can we, want to get a coffee? And let's talk let's go deeper, without being nosy. But again, I think I have a big heart to care for people. And I really want to make sure that everybody comes along and we leave no one behind.
I love that. I think intuition is definitely a superpower that a lot of us have, but whether it's through organizations or I think there's a lot of societal stuff around intuition that we're, especially as women, conditioned to not trust our intuition, right? I think, I think there's less of this now, I hope, but, I think about many of us had the experience when we were young girls of, oh, go give so-and-so a hug, and you didn't want to give someone a hug. You just had an intuition, right? And then it was, don't be like that, right? Or don't think the worst of people. But your spidey sense knows when something's up, right? Trust that intuition. I mentor, currently mentoring a younger woman in our organization. And that was a piece of advice I recently gave to her. And she said, I don't know. I just always feel like I'm second guessing. And I said, I can tell you this. I really cannot off the top of my head think of a time when I went against my intuition and it worked out great for me. I can tell you a million times when I went against my intuition and I was like, I knew it, right? So I really encourage women to really tune into their intuition and get grounded in that and trust it. As much as we love the Forbes article that talked about, hey, women are really great at leading change, Mary liked it less than we did, but we liked it. But there was one downside in the article, and that was, organizations don't think that these traits are that valuable, right? So you believe your empathy is a superpower. You believe your intellectual curiosity is a superpower. How do you go about demonstrating the value of those traits in organizations where Mary's got a lot to say? I just want you can see she's winding up. I've known Mary a long time. She's ready to go. How do you go about demonstrating the value of that in organizations where traditionally these types of things that we're talking about today are not really valued or seen as business skills? Mary, I know I'm going to regret this because Julia and Renee are probably not going to get to talk, but I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Get it, Mary. Get after it. Get after it.
I am deeply suspicious
Get after
of this new religion about soft skills. And I'll tell you why. I believe in them. I think they're valuable, and I think we do have a lock on a lot of them. I don't believe our organizations always know how to recognize and reward them. So we're expected to do the soft skills stuff after we've already demonstrated the hard skills stuff, right? And it's really tough because they've doubled our burden. So I think that one of the things we have to do is somehow either hold our organizations accountable or find organizations that will be held accountable to put soft skills front and center. Because at the end of the day, people don't leave organizations, they leave managers, they leave people, they leave the way they've been treated, they leave the kinds of soft skills they've been on the receiving end of or not, right? So that's just super important. Having said all of that, and I've been, again, very skeptical about all this stuff because I'm married to someone who leads with his feminine in his management and is a super successful manager. And he and I both rolled our eyes about this Forbes article. But because I'm trying to be honest about all of this, I did do a little bit of poking around and discovered, I haven't told you all this. Stanford Medical, 3 weeks ago, published news that they had trained AI, deep learning AI, to look at dynamic scans from functional MRI machines. And they showed them all the scans and said to the AI, can you tell us which scans come from female brains and which scans come from male brains?
Tell me more. Very curious right now.
This deep learning model was able to identify female versus male with over 90% accuracy. At which point my daughter says, that's neurosexism. And what it does show us, and I'm not a neurologist, so I'm just going to do this kind of loosey-goosey fashion, do the reading yourself. It's fascinating. But basically, apparently, men's brains light up in very specific sections when they're trying to figure out how to get from A to B. So let's call that the efficient path. Women's brains light up in A, J, K, Z, Z, sorry, the Canadian came through, Z, Y, X, all at the same time. From the efficient brain perspective, that doesn't look efficient. But what are they doing? They're taking a more holistic view. They're imagining the risks. They're exercising their foresight. They're doing all the things you really want your leaders to be doing. You want your worker bees to be working efficiently. So I'm saying use the Stanford research to call for revolution. Women should be the managers and men should be the worker bees. Sorry.
I love that. I love that you finally got on board, Mary. All the time, finally.
That way it
That's
happens.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's you took your own path to get there, but we were all waiting and we applaud your arrival. Thank you.
Research.
Data. Renee, Julia, do either of you have anything that you wanted to share on the idea of organizational, trying to demonstrate the value of these traits organizationally, or how you might go about that?
Just quickly, I'll just talk just holistically on the change management perspective. There is a statistic that, this is like 30, 40, 50, 60% of technology projects fail because there's no change management. And it behooves us to not have change management in our organizations in this day and age. Change management is about 25, 30 years old, I think, by now. And, luckily, companies that don't have a space for it, they hire people like me just to pop in. But I want to pop in and educate leaders there so that they can do it the next time on their own. But it really is crazy that this skill set is not valued fully in organizations today.
And Renee, when we were talking over at our table earlier today, you mentioned, we were talking about the fact, and we both have had this experience of sharing this bit of information and watching people kind of have this look of amazement on their face, that there are many organizations that have come to recognize the value of change management and the importance of change management. And if not for like all the feel-good reasons, for the reason of getting a return on your investment, right? And in those, many of those organizations, they have created a change management office. So just as over time, many organizations now have a PMO, there is an increasing number of companies, and I think this is encouraging, that now have a CMO, a change management office. And so I think that's pretty exciting. Yeah. Julia, how about you?
I know I'm mindful of time and I know we have a couple more on love, but I wanted to say, I thought it was so interesting. Remember I was saying play well with others and gender normativity. I loved that you were like my husband, who shows a lot of feminine sides, right, in his leadership and is a successful leader. So I actually loved that we looped back to that. And it's true, is playing well with others. Just want to loop back on that.
I like that. So again, to Julia's point, and mindful of time, I think, yeah, we're getting there. We got plenty. Mary's ready. She's like, I have another thing I want to talk about. And then one more thing. So our hope in having this conversation today was that some of you would recognize yourselves in some of the things that we're talking about, or feel like, feel seen because you think that, hey, I do this well, but I don't feel valued in my organization perhaps, or you didn't really understand what an important trait or what an important tool that trait could be in change work. And so one of the things that we wanted to do in the spirit of ILTA is always about practical, right? You come and learn, but then you have something practical to take away. So one of the things that we wanted to kind of close out or kind of wrap on was, if you heard something today that resonated with you, if you saw yourself in some of the things that we talked about, what advice would we give to a woman in the audience who wanted to pursue change work, whether it's in a formal way or you wanted to kind of build an identity for yourself in your organization as someone who is effective at making change happen? And so we wanted to kind of give some practical advice, I guess. Julia, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. As I always kind of, I'm swimming in my work, right, which is D&I. So it's change management, not as lovely and as experienced and as in-depth as my panel members. But one of the things I always say is I am the margins and the center. Does anybody know what that is, where that's from? Bell hooks. And so the idea is that the connection to people is very powerful. And I think we're getting so busy in getting things done that loses it. And change management, like I said, is contact sport. So for me, becoming what's measured is important, right? So McKinsey, let me roll it around really quickly. McKinsey said, in order to future-proof your company, I talk very corporate speak, there's 9 things you need to do. And one of them is treat talent scarcer than capital. And that's where I go in. And how do I make the organization, right, be really smart about their people because you want to keep them? And what I do in that, in making sure I'm talking what they're talking, is becoming measurable, because you are going to help me keep what's important. And when it looks on the other end of it, why would anybody want to follow or do what I'm doing, or, jump on board? Because hopefully they believe in the work I'm doing, because we all know what that's like not to have been informed. We all know what it's like to have been pushed aside, or change happens, or just been told of something. So it's actually okay to identify even when you lead. I know I heard that late too. You are the margin and the center, and you bring people together when you're like, I'm going to find out the best for you, or here's what I heard. Let me confirm that for you, but let me share what I know. That's so powerful. You don't have to have a leadership role or so much power and privilege and information to say, I'm going to share with you what I know. That's really powerful in any regard. So that's what I would share with mine, and become measurable.
Love that. Renee, how about you?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. So I think one of the things I really want to emphasize is that as change leaders, change manager on a change team, we are also the mirror for what that looks like when things go off kilter. So imagine you are the change lead. You find out that the project go live date has changed, and you're the one freaking out in the room. Everybody sees that and goes, oh, she doesn't practice what she preaches. So one of the things we need to do is be resilient for sure, and be able to calm within ourselves and be able to ask the right questions and identify that, hey, realizing that, and I don't know about you guys, but mostly those decisions about changing a go live date happen when no change people are in the room. And we are told probably 3rd or 4th, and now we have to replan everything because they changed it. And we have to then go, hey guys, by the way, great, I'm glad you guys wanted to move the date out, but now it's sitting on top of another project that's happening, going live 2 weeks later, and the same stakeholders are involved in both. So now we have totally topsy-turvy and complicated the lives of those stakeholders. So, we have to remain calm, we have to set the tone, but we have to then get into action to replan so that people have the same confidence. And secondly, I said it earlier, when you are in some of those meetings, if you're lucky to be at the table, please speak up. I don't care who is in the room, a CEO, VP. If you smell something funny, just say, I have a concern about ABC, and I'm concerned that the impact will be DEF if we go in that direction. I always say TOLI, which is take it or leave it. They could always take it or leave it, but you have said your piece in that room with those people. Because at the end of the day, whether the change succeeds or fails, they're pointing to you. So if you don't speak up in the time when you get a chance, then you really have to you can't at the end say, well, I was gonna say, there's no value in that. We speak up when we have the platform in the space, whether it's good news, bad news, or indifferent, because that could make the difference for these stakeholders involved. Because that one thing you say may be the one thing that changes, is the catalyst for an individual or a group of individuals to transform successfully. That's my 2 cents.
Fantastic. fantastic. Mary?
One recommendation and one request. The recommendation, until we're all replaced by robots, we will have to work with people. So to the extent you can, try and stay current with interesting new things coming out in psychology and neuroscience. It will allow you to understand better the behavior of your team and the individuals on your team. It will allow you to help them achieve something better for themselves. It'll also allow you to avoid unexpected unpleasantness, which in a world that doesn't believe in getting ahead of this stuff, we call unintended consequences. You can figure some of this out beforehand and save yourself a boatload of pain. On the request side, I would ask you to reframe a phrase you've heard a lot of today, imposter syndrome, as unsupported person syndrome. It's never been about your deficiencies or my deficiencies. It's been about our being in systems that weren't designed for us or designed to support us. Okay? And particularly in the law, your insecurity makes you more compliant and more willing to work harder. So if you need, and if you have to do this every day, please do it. Get onto YouTube and find the quick commencement speech by Reshma Saujani, who is herself a recovering lawyer and the woman who started Girls Who Code. It's the 2023 commencement speech at Smith College. And what you will discover in that fantastic talk is even the women who did the initial research on imposter stuff never intended it to be pathologized or medicalized or anything. They were just observing something they noticed in a small group of high-functioning, privileged white women. It's gotten blown out of proportion, and now if something gets labeled, when in fact what we're experiencing is our growth edge, and men and women all feel uncertain when they're growing, or our unsupported reality when we don't have the resources we need to do the job.
Well,
I'm ending the sermon there.
that was powerful. I just was gonna give like a bit of practical advice, but now I feel woefully deficient. That was like, wow. I'm gonna sit with that for a while after this. Resonated with, I just been having a chat with Mary, sorry. So I would say my piece of practical advice is you don't have to be certified to be a leader of change, but you can self-certify, or if you have professional development dollars, seek out a certification. As Mary mentioned, not even codders anymore. That's not my methodology of choice. I'm an advocate for ProSci and their ADCAR model, and they have a lot of online resources that you can access and just read. A lot of it you're gonna read and be like, well, duh, right? It's stuff that you already do, but this gives you a framework and it gives you data and research to lean into when you say, I think we should do this, and here's data that supports that, right? Become measurable. So that would be my practical takeaway. I see that we're at time. We could talk about this all day. We would. We did a couple of times. But we would love to invite any questions really quickly before we move on in the agenda. So if there are any questions or comments, we'd welcome those. Silence. I mean, yes.
We're provocative enough.
You know, I just want to briefly intertwine what Julia S. and Mary said. You know, Julia, you may have seen my eyes roll when you talked about how the person devalued your passion. And the way that I saw that is both of those two people, they saw your light. They saw your talent. And for whatever reason, they were threatened by your light, threatened by your talent, because what you have, they lack.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of pained me when you said that still causes you some type of angst. No, because very often when people devalue you, and something happened to me last night, it's more about them or how they see you. But you have to throw that off. And it goes back to what Mary said. Let me just say, we need to hear more from Mary. Mary could have, she can be next year's, and let's talk about this. Because it's the same thing. And it's kind of intertwined that when people question you, you feel some kind of way. And so, Mary, what is it? Unsupported reality, you said?
Person.
Unsupported person.
Unsupported person
Yeah.
syndrome, yes.
And that's really what it is. Like, it's the two connected. And I'll tell it. So I went, let's just say, to a professional function last night. And when I indicated my title, let's just say, it was a little glazed eyed, that they could not believe that I am doing what I'm doing. But because I know who I am, but more importantly, because I'm a person of faith, and that kind of guides me, and I know whose I am. Just let that thing roll on off. When I get a little cat-eyed and all of that, I'm very gracious. I show them grace, and I smile. That's it.
Justice Kennedy, so much wonderful in what you shared. And it reminds me of great counsel that a mentor once gave to me when I said I'd been given feedback that I was intimidating. Dial it back. And she said to me, you need to sit, right? Self-evaluate, but then know who you are and then ask yourself, was I intimidating or were they intimidated? Right? Center it back on them.
I've been told I'm unapproachable.
I mean,
Just to follow on with that. Wow.
Welcome to the club.
All right.
so loud.
I've been called both unapproachable and intimidating,
Welcome.
and I've never felt sorry for it. And it's something that actually kind of pisses me off on a regular basis because I don't own that person's feelings. It is on them. If they feel intimidated, that's a deficiency in their attitude about themselves. And it's not anything that I need to own or mollify about my delivery until I get to be too much of a bitch.
Know where the line is, right? Know where the line is. That's all. Yeah. It's similar. We talked about asking questions, and Mary refined that by saying asking good questions. But when I was given feedback about asking too many questions, I sort of leaned into that mentor advice and said, are they uncomfortable because I'm asking questions, or are they uncomfortable because they don't have the answers? Right? So it's really important, I think, to stay centered and grounded. Trust your intuition, be confident in what you know and what you believe is the right way to go, and then trust in that.
I'll say one more thing to add with it, which was really nice. That same leader gave me a wonderful book. I've given it to a lot of mentees that I have. It's called Rise by Patty whatever. It's very hard to say her last name, but I will try. Azarello. I want to say it nicely.
Get it.
And it's amazing. But one of the things it did was, it's interesting how that same person gave me the book that helped me rise out of that. And so what's really important is there's always something to learn. And I said, if this is going to take me longer not to have this apparent gravitas in a competitive market, then it will take me longer to get there. All of my events that I speak at, all of the networks that I have are all about, you are a senior leader that's so approachable. You're funny. That's how you do it, right? Is that you don't be afraid of your light.
Be your authentic self. We
Right.
talked about that.
And the best revenge is success.
Always. Ladies, we have so much good content for you. We're gonna wrap it up there. Thank you. And everyone will be here for the networking after. So if you want to grab folks and chat, we'll all be around.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.